So, well, thanks for being here and for inviting me. I actually came to Slovenia the first time in the late 80s, before all hell broke loose. So I have a bit of a romantic vision of Slovenia back from the days, because I was a librarian back then and went to a library conference, and they showed me Steiner schools and Montessori schools, and I was really surprised, because I had a bit of an image of the Eastern Bloc that wasn't including those types of schools in my understanding. Anyway, this is some time ago, so I'm glad to be back after a really long time. I just briefly want to mention the other signature under my name. This is something I'm doing for 3 years. And so basically SMART, which in French means Société Mutuelle des Artistes, is a labor mutual. So what we are doing is we're organizing freelancers, bundling their invoices, so we invoice for them as a cooperative. About after 6 months we calculate an average wage. Unfortunately then they will pay taxes, but they get full social protection. And to do this, you pay 2% of your wage or your income in a mutual guarantee fund, which allows us to pay all freelancers within 7 days if they want their invoice to be paid. And they have healthcare, 13th month, unemployment, everything you have in a still functioning social state, even after 30 years of neoliberalism. A lot of things are still working, especially in Belgium, because we were lucky to have 2 years without government at the height of the austerity period, so we've been preserved for a lot of bad things that other countries have had. Anyway, so just saying this because I think a lot of people might be in this situation in Slovenia, and I'm actually meeting people tonight that are doing more or less the same thing, so I'm very curious to learn about that. So I'm going to talk to you basically about the urban commons mostly. I do want to give you kind of a bit of a context of, because I talk all about the commons and peer-to-peer, so you need to know what I mean with this, because it's, it's as usual the definitions, different people use it a bit differently. So when I use the word commons, I mean, it's a bit like a trinity, if you like. So a commons is a shared resource, so there is something objective there. It's either a collection of software, code, design, but it can also be an energy co-op, a housing co-op. So any shared resource is the first thing that you have when you talk about the commons. The second thing is the activity of creating or maintaining or defending it. So as I think Peter Leinveld says, there's no commons without commoning. So very much stressing that commons is a human choice. You can have something as private property, as public property, and you can have it as common property, right? So this is not there out there in nature. Some people would say the ocean is a commons. I would disagree with that. It can be a commons, but it isn't right now. Same with the air. Somebody would say the air is a commons. Well, actually, they mean is it should be a commons, but it isn't. So the third requirement, that's the most important thing then, is you can only talk about commons when it's the rules and the norms of the governance and the property are coming from the community itself, right? So this is very important to have a commons, is that you have this kind of autonormativity, to use a difficult word. So those three things together constitute the commons. Very quickly, making a general ecological argument here, because I know that, how do you say it, humanotera? I'm probably mistaken, but anyway, that there's a very strong linkage between the commons and ecological crisis. I don't know if you're familiar with HANDY. It's a very big study that appeared a few years ago. Human and nature dynamics. Very briefly, you have the gazelles and the tigers. When you have a lot of gazelles, the tigers start eating a lot, and you have more and more tigers, until you have so many tigers that they're eating too many gazelles, and the gazelles implode, and then the tigers implode as well. This is the story of human civilization. Just replace you know, producing classes and ruling classes, you have the same dynamic. This has been seen since the Neolithic. To be, you know, very short about it, every civilization in the past has collapsed. All of them, otherwise we're still living in one of them. And they all collapse for the same reason, because they are peer polities, ruling classes competing with each other, and therefore they overuse the local resources until the moment when the system breaks down. And what happens in those moments, or when, you know, before that moment arrives, is commonification, recommunification of these civilizations. Think about the end of the Roman Empire. What do you see? You see open source communities, the monks in the Catholic Church. You see mutualization of infrastructure, the monasteries, and you see relocalization of production. This happened every time, whether you look at 12th century Japan, which was completely deforested, or China in the 15th century. This kind of dynamic is really permanent. And within capitalism, you have it inside capitalism with the convertive cycles every 60 years. You see periods of mutualization and periods of demutualization, right? You are in the middle of a remutualization phase. The amount of commons, mutualization, is rising exponentially in the whole world. Whether you look at open source code, whether you look at the number of co-ops, whether you look at urban commons, it's exponential. So just to give the example of Ghent, where I went, and this is not exceptional. There's a study, Aftermath, Manuel Castells, about Catalonia. You can read it in Homo Corporans, which is a study about the Netherlands. In Ghent, in the Flanders particularly, we see a tenfold increase in urban commons in 10 years. So when I mapped the urban commons in Ghent, it went from 50 projects in 2006, to 500 in 2016. So this is quite important. And maybe briefly, I can give you a vision of the history of the commons from, it's a bit more European point of view, but it certainly works for Europeans. So it comes in waves. The first wave of the commons is the natural resource commons, right? This is what Eleanor Ostrom talks about. She finds forest commons, irrigation commons, mountain slope commons. You still see them in Austria, in Switzerland. I don't know if you have them in Slovenia. You probably have them, that's good. So these are surviving natural resource commons, because under capitalism we enclose the commons, we privatize the commons. So a lot of these natural resource commons have disappeared, especially legally. If you look at the Napoleonic Code, which is the origin of the law in Belgium, there is no place for the commons. It doesn't even exist. It is not conceptualized in this kind of logic. There's private and public. There's no vision of the commons anymore in the legal system. Which doesn't mean they don't exist, but they exist marginally. So once we start enclosing those commons, the enclosure movement of the 16th century in the UK is the most famous of these enclosure movements. Basically, those commons disappear. And then you have the farmers, the commoners expelled to the cities, where they become workers, when they die when they're 35 on average in 1850 in the English cities. And they start a second wave of commoning, which is mutualization of life risk. If you don't have anything, you don't have property, then you're going to make sure that you have healthcare together, you can get some employment money, you can take care of the elderly and the kids. So you have this massive mutualization in the 19th century, social commons, second phase. This gets, at least in Western Europe, mostly statified, so it's not privatized, but it's statified. The advantage is 100% of people now have social security as a right. The disadvantage is they're no longer commons because they're managed by the state. So that kind of idea also disappears from our civilization. And then the third wave is the one I grew up with. It's the internet and the discovery that we can work together intellectually, we can create knowledge together. So a very important cultural moment to shift towards a recognition of, wow, we can also cooperate together, not everything is competition, it works, and why doesn't it work in the rest of my life? So this has happened to a lot of people starting in the 90s, and I think this is what creates then the fourth wave, which is the urban commons, which is if you mix the new cultural capacity of cooperation with the crisis of 2008, when people are losing a lot of services, and I think you said it, at least I said that from the translation, we have market and state failure, then a lot of people say, well, why don't we do it, right? So we need this, the state is not doing it, the market is not doing it, and so you have this enormous wave of civic self-organization happening globally, but especially it's very strong in Europe. And so this is what happened in Ghent, and I call it the fourth wave, which is urban commoning. Or urban commoning is not production oriented, mostly it's redistribution oriented, right? So if you have an energy co-op, actually that's not so good example, because that actually proves the opposite. But let's say housing co-op. If you have a housing co-op, like a very successful ones they have in Germany with the Miethouses syndicate, doesn't mean you build the houses yet. But it means you buy houses that already have been produced by mostly private companies, but you redistribute them, right? You say, well, let's do the property and government arrangements differently. So this is mostly what is happening today. It's people are redistributing differently within their commons community the resources that they want to mutualize. But they are rarely, at this stage, making them. I just want to point out very quickly that the fifth phase that I predict, and you can see it starting in energy, where we actually can produce our own energy in renewable energy co-ops. You can also see it a lot in farming. 10% of the farming in Western Europe is now organic. It's the only growing sector within farming. It's the only ones where you have positive wages, because industrial farming is not economical. Industrial farms have negative income if they don't have subsidies from Europe. And a lot of these arrangements, if you look a bit at organic farming, you will see they are commons-oriented farming projects, CSAs, consumer-supported agriculture, collective purchasing groups. In Ghent, 80 of the 500 projects were food-related. I just want to give you an example. So I come from Rio. I stayed a few hours in Brussels on the way, but basically come from Rio to here. And one of my early enthusiasms was a project called Curto Café. And I just want to explain to you, because it really shows the difference of thinking when you think how to do something in a commons. So this was a person who was working for a traditional coffee company and was unhappy with the way it was happening. First of all, in Brazil, you have 4 categories of coffee, A, B, C, D. A and B are exported, so they basically get the bad coffee for themselves. Second, most of the workers, actually all of them, who actually produce the commons are very near the poverty line. Whenever there is no supply crisis, they go under. So there's a hyper exploitation of the people who actually make the coffee. So how can you make good coffee and at the same time not exploit the workers? That was the start. So very quickly, here's what they did. They didn't believe in certification. It's too expensive for these small farmers. So they said, let's do full transparency. Point 1. So the whole supply chain is transparent. Where they buy it, how much they pay, it's all available, you can check it. Second, they distributed the machinery for coffee burning. By eliminating the factories and giving these machines to the farmers, they could ruble their income. Yeah, this is really a good thing to do. Then they have a coffee commons, meaning all the knowledge about the blends and how to mix them, and you know, all the experimentation with the coffee is knowledge commons. Fourth, they do crowd-funded retail expansion. So a bit like an energy co-op, where you pay shares and then you get the electricity. In this case, you pay and then you get free coffee as a dividend. So with that money that they crowdfund, they pay rent. And when you go to their coffee shops, they have a poster which says exactly how much the coffee costs and why. They have no cashier. You put the money in a box or not. You need to put something in, and then you get a plastic coin, and you have your coffee in their machines. They also hacked the Nespresso things so they can change the coffee themselves. But I hope you get the picture. This is an entirely new way of looking at business. There is no producers and consumers. There is one ecosystem in which all the players work together to make good coffee. and there's no internal exploitation, and it's full transparency. Right? This is a commons-oriented business model. And when I went there 5 years ago the first time, they had one small shop in the multinational, and now they have 2 of these big, big rooms in Rio. So it's a big success. They're now moving into cheese and beer. Anyway, I just want to tell you the story because I found it out a few days ago. I want to tell you a little bit about the structure of this project, because what I discovered, so I started by studying a number of years open source community. So people make free software. And that's how I came to the notion of the commons. And then I started looking at national knowledge commons in Ecuador in 2014. And I spent 4 months in Ghent last year, 2016, looking at urban commons. And it might sound surprising, but they have the same underlying structure. And I want to briefly explain this. This is what you can see there. So I would argue that the commons is a new value regime. We will have the labor capital value regime, in which only market value, commodity labor is recognized. And the only value that is recognized is market value. If you take care of your kids, or elder people, or volunteer, or clean the beaches after a disaster, this is not value in the current system, right? And there is no structural funding of generative activity under capitalism. We need either taxes or philanthropy to pay for the damage and to do generative work. So just to resume it, very easy. If you're an industrial farmer and you're destroying the soil, you get money. If you're an organic farmer and your soil gets better every year, this is not funded in our current system, right? It doesn't work to structurally fund generative ecological and social activity. The value system in the commons is quite different. The idea is we are all contributors. And here's the second word I wanted to introduce that I forgot, peer-to-peer. Why do we talk about peer-to-peer? Peer-to-peer means that today we are entering an era of open, permissionless, contributory systems. Yeah? We have more and more systems in which the value regime is contributions. Like we're all working at something together, right? And let's say Crypto Cafe. Some people do the farming, some people do the transport, some people take care of the stores. They're all contributors. It's open. Anybody can join this ecosystem. Yeah? And so the value system is how do we recognize contributions, right? So today we have, for example, we did a study of 300 peer production communities. 67% of them had or were working on contributive accounting systems, not capital labor double entry accounting. So this is something I call value sovereignty. The capacity of a community to self-determine what is value for you and your community. This means you have to make a membrane between the commons and the market, and you have to redistribute internally according to your own value system, which is going to recognize non-market value. We can't impose it on the external society yet, but we can do it ourselves. So this means that today, this is where it's happening. If you look at this project, this 5 project, you have to look at the core activity, which is citizens contributing to a shared resource. Of course, you have to make a living. So what you have is on the right, what I call a generative economy. Okay, it doesn't have to be generative, and most of the time it isn't. But if you want to be happy, you better make it that way. So the idea is the following: how do we deal with the market so that it doesn't exploit our common activity, right? So a way to put it is that we come from a Marxist capitalism, in a way. So the basic idea is the surplus comes from exploiting work and nature. That's how you produce the surplus. And we move into a Proudhonian capitalism. In the 19th century, these 2 guys had a big debate. Marx says, surplus value theory, and Proudhon said, no, the surplus comes from working together. Right? So you have 100 craft workers. Individually, you put them together, they're going to be more productive if they work together. That's the surplus. Now, look at all the new companies that you see. Facebook, Google, Uber, Airbnb, they are Proudhonian capitalist companies. They directly exploit human cooperation. P2P commoning and P2P exchange. That's what they capture. That's the value they capture. They're not making things anymore, right? Airbnb doesn't make apartments. Uber doesn't build cars. Google doesn't produce documents. They are using our capacity for commoning and exchanging, and they're capturing the value in between. So they're a bit like medieval toll booth systems. You know, you have to pass through them, through their liturgical infrastructures in order to do this, and then they take their tax on it. So this is not what you want. So the generative economy is what are the business models that you build as a commons community so that you can make a living, and so that the market economy is kind of a moral economy, an ethical economy that is generative towards the commons. And you do the same with the state. So that if you look at the left side, what you see is that behind almost all of these projects, so think first of immaterial production. Linux has a Linux Foundation. Wikipedia has a Wikimedia Foundation. You'll find that if you scratch a little bit and you look at urban commons, you will see that behind the communities there are organizations. This is an important point. How do you look at the world? Yeah? So if you look at the world from a scarcity point of view, which is the standard, we compete for scarce resources. This is economics 101 if you go to business school. Then you say, okay, we have a problem, we have scarce resources, so either through the market or through an NGO, we will direct resources to solve the problem, and we will direct this activity. Yeah? What if you have a viewpoint of abundance? And I want to explain, this is very important. I live in Thailand 6 months a year with my family. And one of the things they have there is family commons. Yeah, so if you have extensive families, they're mixed in the city, in the countryside. If anything happens to you, you get help. Yeah, I was 7 years without income. I always had food and clothing and lodging, everything. So this is a commons. And what you have when you have a commons is you feel safe, right? So if you have here 3 gardens, and your apple tree is not working, you're stressed, because you're not going to have apples. If you share 3 gardens, and there's apples growing in somewhere in your ecosystem, then you don't have to worry, because you'll have apples, right? So this is a kind of abundance point of view. And I know it sounds naive, but it's what you find on my wiki. On our wiki, it says, together we have everything, and together we know everything, right? It means when you mutualize, it doesn't really matter if you have it, if you can have access to it as a community, and if there are good rules. And so again, to give just one example, this is kind of ecological connection. So Partago is a non-profit car sharing association. They have 130 cars, so 1,300 members. It's calculated so that every member always has a car at their disposal. You can discuss whether cars are necessary, that's another debate. But anyway, so that's what they decide. And they do this with, about 90% less cars, right? So think about it in thermodynamic terms. The amount of saved matter and energy when you mutualize is enormous. That's why it's important. So here's the problem we have today. We need to, lower our footprint, but we don't want to give up our benefits of complex systems like healthcare and all of that. The only way to save them is mutualization. Yeah. So if we can't just go back to lifeboats, because today we have nuclear energy, which has a half-life of 100,000 years. I don't know if you have it in Slovenia, but in Belgium we have them, and of course the Germans and the French neatly make their energy, the nuclear energy, just close to the border. So it means that we are condemned to maintain complex social systems. We can't do it like the Romans and abandon everything, because if we do that, you can live in Montpellier, but you still be fried. As a way of speaking, right? So commoning, for me, this type of mutualization is the key to lowering dramatically the human footprint while maintaining the complex systems. So the people in Partago have full mobility at 80% less thermodynamic costs. This is very important. Also, they pay 80% less than if they would buy the car. So the cost of having that full mobility drops enormously. And it's because it's also a lot cheaper, it's more inclusive, more people can join, etc., etc. So this is the basic argument. Now, so this structure, the values created in contributory commons, livelihoods are created through some kind of arrangement with the market systems that exist, and they are commodified, they are adapted to the needs of the commoners, and supporting infrastructural organizations which take care of the infrastructure of cooperation. So the basic idea here is, yes, there are problems in the world, but there are enough people who want and can do something about it. So let's make a platform that allows these people to work together in these contributory ways. So this is the general idea. My idea, and of course that's a jump, is that this is a new social model. This is a new civilizational model. Yeah? How do societies change? There's a lot of theories about it. My theory is it's seed forms first. Yeah? So if we have capitalism, it's because we had capitalists, basically. And because over 400, 500 years they developed the idea of purgatory, which allowed Christians to do business, because otherwise they would go straight to hell. We have the printing press. We have double entry book accounting. We have, lots of things. The Reformation. All these things combining together to create patterns of activity and values that eventually come together and form the capitalist system, right? So I would suggest that if you look at all these seed forms today, we are building already a post-capitalist civilization that can live in harmony with nature and also has some basic income distribution limits. This is very important, by the way. If you look at the Handy study, you see that equality is very important. The more unequal the society, the longer it overshoots, because they don't feel it. Yeah, they don't have to. They don't feel it. So the longer, the higher the overshoot, the deeper the fall, and the longer it takes to get back at the same level. On the other hand, the less inequality you have, the more people feel it, the less overshoot, and the more rapid is the restoration after the crisis, right? So there is a strong connection between the environment and the social system. So this is basically what I propose, that we are moving towards a civilization, an economic and political model, where society is productive. Civil society is productive, is creating value through contributions, and these contributions are recognized. The economy becomes an ethical and moral economy, so more the situation like in the Middle Ages than the situation is today. More just pricing and less true pricing. And we have a new vision of the state, a partner state, which is basically an enabling state form. And I want to explain how this can work at the city level. So this is what people are working on in Ghent, but also in Italy. You're probably familiar with the Bologna Declaration regulation for the care and regeneration of the urban commons, which is now nearly practiced in 200 cities in Italy. I went to Co Battaglia, Co Palermo, Co Bologna. I'm about to go to Co Torino in the spring. So these are all cities which have basically doing something very similar in structure to this. So the idea here is to see the city. At this time, it's more easy to work with cities than with nation states. Nation states are very difficult places right now to do any change. But at the city level, there's a lot happening. And so in these cities, they are adopting already these partner city models, right? So basically it means that with this regulation in Italy, any citizen group can say, we want to care about this. Because commoning is caring. Yeah? If we talk about the care economy, commoning is caring. You care together, you care for a resource. you take responsibility to care for a resource. And so basically you go to the city lab, and the city acts as a convener of the support coalition. So let me just briefly explain this. So you have all the initiatives that people want to make. They go talk to the city lab, and the first step is to make a commons accord. Well, a commons accord is an agreement between the city and the collectives about the rules of commoning. Why is this important? If you read Ostrom, you will see that she says there's zero success for projects which are not connected with public authorities. You need recognition or they can destroy you. I'll give you an example. It's a bit silly, but I like it as an example. And I actually used the first page is 2 pigs. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but capitalist pigs are very stressed. So they have corked tails. Yeah? Commons pigs, and there's a commons park in Ghent, have long tails like dogs, and they go like this. So the problem is it's not legal to have these kinds of animals in the city. So they have a beautiful park, they restored it as citizens, they have now playgrounds, and it creates a lot of kind of social cohesion in that poor neighborhood. And they have the pigs. Without an agreement with the city, they can just close down your activity, right? So you need to make these agreements in order to be protected, and so you need to be recognized by public authorities in order to have safety and security in the long term. So that's what the Commons Accord does. Second step, and I have to be fast now. Second step is to see the city as a convener for a support coalition. So what kind of support do you need as a project? A bit of money, a space, advice, mentoring, coaching, legal advice, doesn't matter. But the city, because the city knows all the players in the territory, can be a help in arranging support coalitions for this project. So in Italy, this is called a 5-star. No, it's not a 5-star, that's the political movement. The 5 something, I forgot, anyway, something with 5. Quintuple, there's the quintuple helix, I remember. So the quintuple helix governance form in Italy is the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the research organizations and formal civil society, NGOs, are organized together to help the commons. Right, so that's the support coalition, that's the governance method they use there. So very quickly, this is basically what I proposed in Ghent, and it actually already practiced. I call this contributory democracy, which is different from representative and participative democracy. Representative democracy is I vote for you and you can decide in my place. Participative democracy is you asking me what I think, most of the time. Contributory democracy is a bit different. It's the idea that, okay, we need a food transition. So we have a food transition council in the city, and a mobility transition, and a habitat transition council, right? It has to be someone representative, but that means that you will get predatory delay. So if you're a large farms organization using pesticides, you're going to think of the organic farms as a bunch of hippies. And you're going to say, of course we need to change, but, right? And that is called predatory delay, and we don't have much time left. Then you have these people actually doing it. In other words, you get elected on an ecological platform. So you have a democratic mandate, but you're not doing it. And these people, these commoners, are actually solving your problems. So that, in my view, that creates democratic legitimacy. And so you integrate the doers, the commons, the collectives, in the institutional settings for decision making. I know. Well, that's basically the proposal. And now, as a conclusion, do I see anything? No? Can you help me? Because I actually have an important thing to show. So, very, very briefly, under Predonian capitalism, this is what we have. We have commons and peer-to-peer. This is a general rule. Everything that's new today has those elements. But you can have centralized for-profit versions. Facebook, yes, 2 billion people can communicate with each other in peer-to-peer. In Ostend, in Belgium, we have a community fisheries association using Facebook. Perfect. But the back end, the data, the governance of property, are all centralized. Sorry. Second, distributed capitalism, the blockchain and Bitcoin. We're all atomized individuals, we can't really trust people, so we need to make contracts with each other and we verify it with technology, and this is the future of humanity. We all become little traders. This is of course growing very rapidly, 18 billion investment just this year already. And then we have the urban commons, so local, benefit oriented, and the global situation, the global commons. Here's what I propose. As we move from a Marxist capitalism to a Proudhonian capitalism, the social and ecological struggle takes on a new logic. And the logic is, what are you building and how are you building it? What kind of socio-technical system are you creating as a collective in order to change your life and deal with resources differently? And so, if you remember what I just showed, this is the alternative. So we want to change platform capitalism into platform cooperativism. We want to own our own platforms. Smart is a platform co-op. We have 20,000 co-op members. We have 250 million euro turnover. And we offer full social security to our members. And we're in between the market of freelance labor and demand for that labor. But we own the platform. This is very important. Ledger co-ops. So this is the blockchain world. The blockchain itself is still an energy war. It's not a good solution yet. But the idea of this real ledger is very important because accounting is how you see the world. If you use double entry accounting, you see the world from your own personal perspective. Are my assets growing or not? No ecosystem, no externalities. If you use contributive accounting, if you use REA accounting, resources, events, action, flow accounting without double entry, if you use thermodynamic accounting, what kind of matter and energy am I using in my systems? You see the world with its environmental limits. Yeah? So we need to build these kinds of systems, shared supply chains and distributed ledgers. And then very quickly, cosmo-local co-ops means that whatever we do locally, we have to realize today we're not isolated. We are SLOCs, small, local, open, and connected. So even if we do permaculture in Slovenia, we are connected with the global permaculture open design course. And we're creating global communities at the same time. So everything that's light is global, everything that's heavy is local. Cosmo-local modes of production. And finally, protocol co-ops. If we want good organic food and we create CSAs, do we want to do like in Italy and have 13 different pieces of software to order food in a small region? No way. This is giving victory to the other side. What we need to do is we need to build protocol co-ops. What do we need to do organic food? What do we need for cooperative mobility? What do we need for more collective forms of habitat? We're not going to do that 3,000 times, right? So we need to create global open design depositories that we can use locally, adapt locally, use all the diversity, but we need to mutualize, and we're not doing it. We are super fragmented, and as long as we are fragmented, we are wasting an enormous amount of energy everybody doing the same thing over and over again and not learning from each other. Thank you.